All right, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for joining us. Today we're going to be talking about inventory and data-driven inventory management. We'll be looking at how real-time data can drive inventory management, and we'll discuss an overview and best practices in the process. This webinar is brought to you by Parsec. We are the makers of TrakSYS, and the company has been around for about 30 years. Just on the side here, you can see a few of the clients and the industries that we cover. So in case you have an interest in knowing a little bit more about who our current clients are, these are just a few. TrakSYS is currently deployed in over 100 countries and has several thousand deployments. So my name is Catherine Gutierrez. I am joined also by Corey Vodvarka. He comes to us with 15 years of experience, and I will be interviewing him today based on his background in inventory management. I'm also joined by Chris Gray. He is our applications engineering expert. And again, I'm your host, Catherine Gutierrez. Our format today is an interview session, and I've reached out to a few of you over the past week. We've collected your questions to help guide the conversation. So I want to thank you for the feedback that you've provided. We're going to be using this format in our webinars moving forward. We think it's a great way to keep the conversation flowing. So as we discuss today, please feel free to think of questions and comments that you may have, both for today's webinar and for upcoming topics that we'll be sending out to you as well, so that we can keep those conversations going. We're also looking at Corey's background as a plant manager and a Lean Six Sigma expert to help us understand what we should be looking at from an inventory system. So you may wonder how you're going to send in questions. We'll answer all of your questions at the end of the webinar. As you have them, as they come to mind, please feel free to input them. They're over on that right-hand side. There's a little chat bubble. Just go ahead and click on that, and you can go ahead and enter your question, and we'll be able to answer that for you at the end of the webinar. So please submit those as they come through. And so we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to be interviewing Corey, and we'll then go through and bring in Chris to walk us through an actual inventory management system. And like I mentioned, we'll wrap up with questions. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump on in. Corey, you've had an impressive career in manufacturing. Can you tell us a little bit about your work history?
Yeah, I've worked the majority of my career in manufacturing in a variety of roles. This includes maintenance, engineering, quality. I've deployed Lean and Six Sigma in a couple of global manufacturers. I've been a plant manager several different places and director of regional operations, managing integrated supply chains for one of the largest automotive battery manufacturers, as well as one of the largest aerospace component manufacturers.
Cool. So it sounds like you know what you're doing. Let's have you tell us a little bit about the business benefits of optimizing inventory management.
In most companies, management doesn't really have good visibility or real-time visibility for their inventory. Things like locations, quantities, statuses as it moves through the manufacturing process. Because of this, they're very slow to become aware of inventory issues like stockouts, replenishment delays, and processing delays. And these things can really lower productivity and affect good on-time delivery performance. As well, many companies don't have a good way to account for scrap and yields, and this can really affect the accuracy of their production counts and their inventories. So most companies can really benefit from inventory management and see things like shortened lead times, better on-time delivery, and lower costs as a result of implementing better inventory management processes.
That does sound helpful. So how would somebody get started with inventory management? What would they be looking to do?
So many people are dealing with ERP systems. Some even have warehouse management systems, but these types of systems are really transactional by nature. Operations loses visibility once materials are released to production, and typically these systems aren't updated until the job is completed. So depending on the processing times, this could be days before they can actually get updates in their system as to status of production and inventory. So this, as a result, scheduling people are often making calls several times through the day to the production departments. Inventory management personnel are going around and trying to chase down inventory because they don't have that visibility in their systems. So without real-time visibility into inventory and production, data may not be available to make effective decisions. And this really delays decisions as well. The ability to be agile and responsive to customers, it can really become a competitive advantage if done right. So ISA 95, it provides a framework for how data is stored and exchanged between different business systems. By interfacing and exchanging information between systems like ERP, warehouse management systems, and the automation systems, manufacturing operations management systems can fill these gaps to provide real-time performance data and inventory visibility so operations can be much more responsive to the customers.
So you talked a little bit about delays and responsiveness. How would you define an inventory balance, and how could we maintain that?
So an easy way of looking at this is the way supermarkets work. So as consumers go through and purchase materials, they pull things off the shelf. Those shelves are replenished. As the shelves are replenished from the warehouses, the warehouse orders more material to be delivered in, and the process continues. So it works just the same in manufacturing and supply chains. But in supply chains where material is pushed through the plant downstream processes, they may not have good visibility for what's going on upstream. As a result, inventory can sit stagnant. And you understand when you have different functional groups, it really relies on good communication between those functional groups to understand the statuses. So in most factories, material spends a lot more time sitting in inventory queues than it actually spends being converted, in value-added processes. Companies often overlook the fact that reducing inventory quantities and hold times can greatly reduce their delivery lead times. So I always recommend attempting to convert to a pull system. And what this means is utilizing Kanbans or replenishment notifications. This can greatly reduce stagnant inventory and maintain a balance to your target inventory levels throughout the facility. This is especially important in products that spoil or expire. But at the end of the day, it's going to give you much more responsiveness to your customer, quicker lead times, availability to hit promise dates much more readily.
Okay, so speaking of stagnant inventory then, can a system like this help us lower inventory levels?
Yeah, inventory accuracy is a key to operational performance. There's nothing worse than accepting a customer order, scheduling a line, figuring out you don't have the material to run the job. You've just wasted a bunch of people's time, and at the end of the day, you have to go back to the customer and modify those delivery dates. So many manufacturing practices can cause inaccuracies in the inventory system. People deal with data entry errors, unaccounted scrap or yield loss, process variations, accounting principles like backflushing based on standards versus actual accounts. And believe it or not, there's many companies out there that have no cycle count programs in place. And these can all cause inaccuracies in inventory. These inaccuracies, coupled with manufacturing inefficiencies, are often managed by carrying much more safety stock in the facility, throughout the facility, and in all steps of the process. So as you get better visibility into your inventory, improve the accuracy, and at the same time improve manufacturing reliability, you can continue to ratchet down these inventory levels. And at the end of the day, that frees up cash for your business to invest in other areas.
Absolutely. That's great feedback. So speaking of stopping inaccuracies and being cleaner in our process, I'd like to bring in Chris now to actually show us around some tools that we can use to do that. A little background on TrakSYS while Chris is getting ready. TrakSYS is a software platform. It reinforces best practices for managing inventory along the lines of what Corey was talking about. And so I'd like to turn the time over now to Chris. Can you talk to us a little bit more about TrakSYS, Chris?
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take us through a couple of slides relating towards the product first to try to give a bit of a baseline for those who may not be familiar with it. After that, I'll hop over into the product and we'll go through some of the inventory-related uses of it in some example scenarios that I have prepared. So in the center of this first slide here, you can see that TrakSYS platform. That's the product that we've been referring to. It is a full MES MOM software. Now that doesn't mean it has a lot of capabilities. As you can see on this slide alone, there's references to things like ERP, batch planning, the ability to use this for line, quality, lean, etc. But for today, for this discussion, we're focusing just on the inventory portions of it. Now, on the right-hand side, you can see there's a lot of different business applications that this is going to interface with. So TrakSYS, through various APIs and other methods, can communicate with things like your ERP system, a LIMS system. If you have some type of warehouse storage already, we can utilize this information and use TrakSYS to augment it. On the left-hand side, you can see there's information about business users. This is the entire user base that may be using the software. You'll be able to communicate with TrakSYS and have operators provide information, interact with information, as well as report against it, all through a single web browser interface. This web browser is going to be very flexible, allowing you to access information wherever you need it, whenever you need it, without having to worry about any bulky software or front end. And then at the bottom, you can also see that there is the real-time aspect of it, where we'll communicate with things like you're receiving production areas, shipping areas, warehousing areas, through a variety of different protocols, things like Internet of Things, PLCs, and OPCs, to get information about your environment in real time that we can utilize with all these other sources to provide you a clearer, fuller picture of what's going on in your operation and in your facility. All this information is provided in a real-time environment that's going to be given to your operators, given to who needs it when they need it. So as you can see from the image in the bottom, this type of software is going to work on any device that you need. You can use it on a laptop or a tablet or a mobile device and still have the same information and the same screens. This is going to help ensure that no matter who you are or where you are, if you have a device that can reach it, you're going to be able to get the information that you need when you need it most. This will help you with things like tracking your spoilage, doing cycle counts, being able to track your inventory when you receive material, when it expires, and ensuring that that data is always live, always up to date, and always correct. This in total is kind of TrakSYS in a nutshell. We're going to be looking into a demonstration where you'll be able to see how we can do things like setting up inventory when we receive it, tracking that inventory as it changes, making changes to it, doing things like cycle counts and spoilage, and doing this all through a simple web-based environment that can integrate with all of your other, with all the other infrastructure that you already have. All right, if you give me just one moment, I'm going to hop over to a demonstration environment where you'll be able to see all of those.
Perfect. While you're doing that, just a quick reminder, we're getting some questions in already, and so please feel free to keep those coming. As you have questions, as they hit top of mind, just go ahead and go over to that bubble on the right-hand side of the screen and pop in your questions, and again, we'll collect those and go back to them at the end. So go ahead, Chris.
Thank you, Catherine. So what we're looking at now is a live version of the software. You can see this is my Orange County. Sorry about that. This is our Orange County environment. This is a demonstration environment that we use that has everything from planning to warehousing, batching, tableting, and packaging all across the top, all the different portions of our facility and all of our different processes. You can see these sections as well as other portions like configuration, developer, and administration, which are going to control the back end to it as well. So from this simple web interface, you have the ability to control everything from the front-end interactions to the back-end creation of the environment. For this, we're going to be focusing primarily upon the warehousing portion, which is going to contain most of our inventory management solution. But since it is an MES M1 software, it is going to be impacted by a lot of other areas as well. So we're going to actually start out with the planning portion here. Now, I'm going to hand it over to Corey to give a little bit of context first, and then I'll come back in just a little bit to explain how that connects more towards the inventory-related screens.
Thanks, Chris. What you see here is many of our systems deliver data and KPIs to managers. It's important that managers have good visibility at the top end for KPIs and process-related exceptions. So in most implementations, we sit down, we We talk to the different managers involved within the process and help understand what is important to them, what are the key things that they need to respond to in terms of KPIs and in processing exceptions that is going to help them really make their processes much more efficient and have the information to make intelligent decisions. So here we start off with a planning and scheduling dashboard that helps us understand weekly performance in regards to the scheduling process and on-time delivery of those jobs and work orders, and how that relates to scheduling changes and inventory values associated with the scheduling process.
Alongside of all this, there's going to be a lot of additional context that we're going to pull in from other systems. So a lot of this is driven by things like a schedule to determine what we're producing, when we're producing it, and what we're going to need. All this information can be pulled from things like an ERP. So if you have automation for it, if you have other systems, we can take ERP information, determine based upon what you want to produce at the end, how much you need to produce before that. You want to have 2,000 or 20,000 bottles output at the end. That means you need to make X amount of product compound to be able to produce it. We can use all this with configurable bills of materials to identify your material needs and what you need in your inventory as context for what we're going to be recording later on. In addition, a lot of the different portions of this information are going to reside in TrakSYS, but they're going to be displayed in other sections of the implementation. So you're going to see things in the warehousing about what materials we have, but it's not going to be limited to just that warehousing portion. You can see in this batching screen here, we're looking at things like pre-weighing. We're tracking what jobs we're trying to produce based upon that ERP information, and we can see what materials we're going to need to be able to produce that job. This will use the context of things like what's currently available in the warehouse, so we know what we can produce, when we can produce it, and we can impose limitations based upon that, like not starting a job that may not have materials readily available. So from here, we're going to hop over to the warehousing section and start going through a lot more of that specific information. I'm actually going to start in one of the tabs a little bit farther down, receiving, so we can go through a bit more of the full process of how you can record information in the system. Now, we can have everything from receiving to tracking the materials and to reporting against it. But of course, the first part is going to be getting the information into our system. This is an example of a manual-based screen that's going to allow you to identify new materials in the system. Of course, if you do have automation for it, we can track that and we can use any types of barcode scanning to be able to identify what it is that you're incorporating or what you're inserting into our database, as well as the ability to track things like lot and sublots based upon those outside sources. Now, for our example process here, we're simply identifying an item that we want to record. We're identifying what it contains, what quantity, lots and sublots, even valid and expiration dates, then identifying some context. I have an example where I'm recording the user that's currently active. Of course, you can use the current logged in user or any user type of authentication you would like, as well as additional context, for example, a COA, so we can determine if that or what the sort of analysis number is for reference in potentially another system, like a file management system. Once you've created items, we can track these items and update them and see where they've been, what they're going to do. So for this example, I can pick any item that I would want, and I can track that item and change the item's information through pre-generated screens. So in this example, I could scan a specific one, or I'm going to pick one that's going to be a little more interesting. It's tote 328. This tote is one that contains a specific material. This one is agile compound, and it's currently located at a tableting line. I have the ability to do things like spoil it, do a cycle count, split it into multiple other items if I'm going to do things like a pre-weigh and split it off individually. I can move it to various locations, and I can do this all while recording quantities, recording users, recording context as necessary. Now, this is a more manual-based screen. Of course, the more automation you have, the more we can utilize. If you have things like RFID chips that you can use to locate when an item moves from one location to another, we can record these movements automatically. If you have AGVs, autonomous guided vehicles, we can also utilize its information if it has a way to know where it's currently located and update these in real time as well without needing any form of human interaction. The more automation you have, the more we're going to use for it, and hopefully the less screens you need and the more you can just focus upon the reporting aspects of it. In addition to this, this is a more generic version of it where you can select any action you want. It's very easy and very possible to take any of these actions and assign them to their own specific types of screens. For example, perhaps I don't want an operator to do a cycle count through here. I don't want them to be able to see the information for it, because this tells me exactly what it was, and perhaps I want them to do a blind count instead. You can very easily create separate cycle count screens, like this one here, where instead of having them have all the information readily at hand, I can simply tell an operator, you're responsible for everything on batching line 1. There's only 7 items here. An operator can go select that, and they'd be able to see the items. But in this case, they don't have the actual values. They just have the pallet name, what's in it, and the lot for verification. And then they're prompted to provide some kind of a value. This allows you to have different variants of the same type of updating based upon your types of needs. Once you've completed any types of changes that you may want for an item, things like these cycle counts, things like moving the individual items around that you saw earlier, we can also do one more step with the individual items and track it all the way to where it came from, what was used for it, and what it was used for. So I'm going to pick that 328 again, and what you'll see when I load this is it's that same agile compound on that same tablet line, but I can see the actions that were taken in the history of it. I can see when I first got it from the supermarket. I can see when it was first consumed for something. I can see when I last did my cycle counts. And I can track what was used to create this agile compound. I can also track what was this agile compound used in. In fact, I can see this compound was already consumed by a tableting operation. So I can track that tableting operation if I wanted to, and find how this can impact other portions of my process. That's a lot of different ways you can track the individual items. That's the base level of a lot of our inventory, is to be able to see where these went and how it changed over the course of time. Now, with all those records, of course, you're going to want to have some way to report against it that can provide you with additional grouping, additional context, and aggregations and analysis that you don't have to try to stare at a list of information to determine. So you can see a couple examples that I have on the left-hand side over here. The first one is location tracking. I already know where these items are. Perhaps I want to be able to look at them in groups. I have different types of locations that I'm using. You can group these in any way, shape, mechanism that you would like. I've identified it by types like storage, staging, and production. In my storage locations, I only have a supermarket, but I can see every item in my supermarket. These are all currently work in progress materials, so I can see here's my tablets and compounds from previous jobs. I can see they were all counted recently, but none of them are consumed and none of them are moved, which is fairly expected. If I want to look at something like a production line, I click production. Here's all the different lines that I have. I can see on batching line 1, there's 7 materials that are currently sitting there waiting for consumption. Most of them were consumed in the last day. A couple of my alternatives haven't been, or what were used yesterday, but they were used the day before. And I have the same capabilities of things like tracking. Another way I can look at this information is not by location, but by material or product types. So instead of showing everything on location 1, I can look and see I have a bunch of batching materials. These are all my raw batching ones. I can see how much I have across any locations in my inventory. So here's my maltodextrin. I can see in the inventory I have 2 separate lots of it. In total, for 93 kilograms worth. I can use this information with all the other types of updates, with things like the consumption records, with things like the spoilage records, to determine how much I go through on a regular basis. And I can use that for things like a days to empty evaluation, so I can determine how long until I'm likely out of stock. You can also incorporate other information for this, things like your scheduled use, talking back towards that ERP integration, where with this scheduled use, I can determine how long I should be out based upon my planned consumption, instead of just an average use. This type of information is just a simple aggregation of the data that's already collected, and this will allow you to do things like derive actions. In a report like this, where I'm looking at all my raw materials, I can see immediately this fish oil is below my 2-day stock minimum. Now, in my example, I have a simple reorder button, but if you wanted to take it in this direction, you can also have it do automatic reordering for you. We can very easily, on any type of trigger, like anything falling under 2 days, have it do things like send out notifications, have it send out reorders, create workflows of tasks that people need to complete based upon that trigger. This allows you to automate a lot of the process, automate a lot of the changes that you need and actions that you need to happen based upon the data that we've collected for you. And this can be applied not just to the raw inventory levels and the consumption portions, but to any type of action you're taking. I have things like my spoilage records where I can see when items were spoiled. I'm in this case grouping by my individual material types just for a little bit of human readability, but I can see which materials I'm using consistently that are not spoiling a lot compared to my actual consumption versus which ones where I should definitely take another look at. I can immediately see on this one, iron grade B and flaxseed oil, which happen to be two of my alternatives. Neither of these alternatives are being used extensively. I spoil it far more than I end up using it as my alternative. So perhaps I need to take a look at how much I'm ordering and how often I order and reevaluate when I need to get more of these materials. I could do the same thing for cycle counts and track things like when a cycle count record was off. See that cycle count record, see its previous or after or its later cycle counts, and determine if something has a problem with being tracked properly. In this case, my very first record, with all records pulled at the top, is a count of my Driscollin 500 bottles. It looks like at one point I had a miscount, but since then it's been correct every time, which bodes well to think that my process is recording accurately. But if I saw multiple red bars, I can immediately know that most likely something is not recording correctly, and therefore I'd want to address that at some point in the future. So with all this information, you can trigger any type of notifications you need, trigger any type of workflows. You have a lot of flexibility and a lot of power to be able to collect this data in any way that may be valuable to you, and use anything like our more standard type reports, standard uses, or anything that may be specific towards your implementation. Hopping towards the slides for a moment, today I was able to cover an example of a material solution, tracking the different changes of your material inventory needs. We're able to maintain inventory accuracy using things like those cycle counts and those spoilage and inventory transitions to be able to benefit your facility and benefit your overall inventory.
Thanks, Chris. So today we covered a little bit about real-time inventory management as well as elements of traceability. But TrakSYS itself is a fully unified manufacturing operations management software system with capabilities in a variety of ranges. The system is fully integrated with a variety of solutions, and we're happy to talk to you further about some of these other solutions. Every month we do webinars covering the different solutions that TrakSYS has to offer. So feel free to reach out to our website and take a look at some of the previous webinars, or contact us directly and we can speak further about these other solutions that we offer.
Thanks, Corey. So we've got some questions that have come in through the chat section. I'm going to go ahead and pull those up, and we're going to send those out to Corey and Chris to answer for us. So last chance, if you have another question that you would like to have submitted to our team and answered, go ahead and put those in. And if you're super shy, don't worry. We'll give you some information at the end that you can actually reach out to us directly as well. So I'm going to start with the first question that I have up here. This is coming from Steve, and the question is, does Parsec have a serialization module? Chris, Corey, who'd like to take that one on?
I can answer that one. So yes, we can do serialization. Every record that you saw has the ability to record a lot and sublot to go with it. It makes it very easy to also group the data by those lot and sublot numbers, whether you be recording on the very quick showing of the batch screen that I showed you guys, or if it happens to be on any of the inventory update screens. So you'll be able to take any lots, see where it was used, where it was consumed, using those specific fields. Additionally, if you have any additional information you need to track with that serialization, whether it be some other grouping, vendor, etc., there's also some configurable fields that are intended for additional data capture. So you can record not just serialization, but additional context to help with that serialization as well.
Perfect. Another question for you. Can you handle roll goods, i.e. roll of polyester at 1.5 inches wide by 2,000 feet long?
Yes, I'll take that one as well. For the goods themselves, there's a couple ways that you can address having them at different sizes, lengths that you may need. If it's going to be a standard length for the product itself, you can identify that as individual products, so we can group those very easily. If it's going to be something that varies, like 1.5 inches wide by X number of feet long, whether it be 2,000 or it may go over that or under that, you can also identify that as one of the product's attributes and be able to have it vary for the purposes of recording. The only question ends up being, how do you want to report against this? Are you going to report by the individual counts of it, or do you want to report by the volume? Both ways can be accomplished very easily. It's more of a question of what's going to benefit you and your facility more.
Perfect. June asks, what is the depth of your multi-level location setting?
Ooh, that one's fun. So there is actually no limitation on that one. Most places don't end up using more than 4 or 5 levels at most, but you can go as far as you would like. You can nest them as much as you need. Additionally, when you get to that far level of nesting, of having a lot of different location levels, there's also a couple settings of things like location types that allow you to group them together even if they're not within the same level. So we have the ability to do as many levels as you need, and the ability to record and report against them by other groupings besides the straight multi-level portion.
Cool. Corey, this looks like it's for you. Can I give suppliers direct access to the system to manage inventory?
Yeah, actually, there's a lot of great applications that can be done by giving suppliers direct access to TrakSYS. We allow, limitations to be created based on user roles and so forth, so they don't have full access to the system, just what's allowed. But there are some pretty neat applications that can be done around vendor managed inventory, advanced shipment notifications, so having that supplier supply information on when the product was shipped, certificate of analysis information that they've provided so you can look at that and review it before the material arrives, be able to have status updates in terms of when things are to arrive, increasing your visibility outside of your 4 walls, as well as, like I mentioned, vendor managed inventory. If you have things like bulk tanks, allowing that vendor to be able to see what the current inventory levels are and generate triggers within the system to notify them to send more material in. So there's a lot of neat different solutions that can be created by allowing your supplier access to the system. Perfect.
So I think the last question we have is, which ERP platforms does this connect in with?
So TrakSYS is able to connect into really just about any major ERP system out there. SAP, Oracle, JD Edwards, we've worked with all the major as well as minor ERP systems. Our data management service is very universal in the fact that it can connect to a variety of different data sources, different databases, and data sources out there. So all the major ERP systems we have no issues with connecting to, as well warehouse management systems that may exist.
Fantastic. Chris, Corey, thank you so much. What we've done is pulled up our website here for those of you who had more questions on inventory management and wanted to go to the site to get some more details. You can visit parsec-corp.com/solutions/inventory. There's some white papers, brochures, infographics here as well. For those of you who'd like to talk to us a little bit further or have other questions, you can go ahead and send me an email. My name again was Catherine, it's CATHERINE@parsec-corp.com. And we look forward to having you join us on the next webinar. Thanks so much for your time today. Have a wonderful week, and we'll look forward to talking to you soon. Thanks so much. Take care.